Welcome again to Wickerson Studios. I keep plugging through this Grasshopper for Rhino, the ABCs 1, 2, 3s. However, the deeper we go into it, we're into our second tutorial or a video on sets. I really have to encourage you to jump into Mode Labs and start looking at what it's like to design beyond the data you've been using and start using lists and data trees. That's going to be essential for getting through this. That said, I wanted to do a little plug there and then dance back over to what's happening in the set file. It's getting pretty ugly. Pulling out all the nodes out of sets and then basically trying to get into each one. So let's just fly on the second set of sequence. We've already done lists, and this would be number 2 on sets. So let's jump on in and see what happens with these nodes. Calling index is simple. Basically, you've got the ability to wrap and unwrap a number slider that you're going to take out wherever you want a digit out of here, and that's all you're doing. I'm starting with the same basic range that I've been using the entire time that I used in the last list set. So if you see what's coming out of that range, I'm going to be using that quite often. It's obviously 0 to 10, and of course I'm calling out these numbers. That's exactly it. Same thing happens here. I've got call frequency, how often I want to call them out, and so in doing so, you've got basically if I called out every single one, that's what happened. If I called out every second one, every third one, you'd end up influencing that set. Call pattern, the same thing, and we'll keep bringing down our original set. Call pattern allows you to work in booleans. You can type in true and false as long as you capitalize the T and the F and put it into multi-line data, but there you go. You got false, true, true, and that's basically how we're calling. And to change that, you would go in and just alter whatever was here. And multi-line data is here if you want to click it on or off. Of course, it doesn't work if you have it on. So let's take a look at the next one, random reduce, which is kind of cool. There's a seed, and I just set that between 1 and 1,000. That's going to change everything as we do it, and we're reducing 5. And it's just picking and choosing 5 every time I go. And it's kind of a random tool, and it's a pretty cool thing to influence your geometry. So if you want to reduce by 3, if you want to reduce by 9, if you want to reduce by 10, that's basically what you're doing to your set. Okay, so that's one section done. Maybe I'll take this one off. Well, I'll group this as my wonderful happy blue, which makes me happy. Okay, and basically character sequences is something you have to get into as well. And so character sequence is a cool tool that'll pull out a count from whatever you want. And what I do is usually, if I had a count of 10, which is the default, I always recommend exporting whatever was internalized and then bringing that into a panel and seeing what was actually typed in for you. So they've got a nice set in character sequence to start, and then you're basically deciding on how long you want that count to be for that. I have a little slider here because I could, I think I was using it somewhere. Probably I was using it for formatting, which was kind of interesting to think about what that means. You can bring it to any digit you want, but the problem is I think something happens if you format. No, that's fine. You can format anything you want. You can format numbers, format letters, anything. I just leave it off, and I want to input. I want to leave it to its default. So I'm going to hit Control, and there we go. And the default is to set. Sets it in at 0, not at this digit 0, just leaves it as it is. There is a repeat duplicate data, which is excellent. How many times do you want to write that out? So there it is once, there it is twice, there it is 3 times, and so on. Easy tool, duplicate data. And you can use this for numbers. I'm obviously using it for, we're not dealing with lists, and we're not dealing with lists of lists, but right now we're just dealing with simple data. Okay, so now we've got a Fibonacci series, which which is pretty cool. You can choose the number to start it at, you can choose how it progresses, and you can choose the number that you want in your set count. Really nice series for getting some beautiful geometries. Next one, I'm dealing with the same range, pulling it in again, but I'm using the showing the basic range tool as it stands. Steps 5, I guess I could step it at whatever I want. I guess I'll do 0 to 10 and then have steps 5. Repeating data is the same thing. If I did that, what happens when I do this? I'm repeating the data up to how many in the number length I want that data to go to. So if I hit the limit of what I had in the pattern, say I only had 0, 5, 10, how long do I want that? It's going to do 0, 5, 10 to the list length that I set for it. I'm going to bring that back up to 5 probably, I guess. Yeah. And now sequence is very cool. It has this notation that's in here. I haven't really learned how to manipulate it too much. I've tried to go in and use it with multi-line on and off, but basically it's a notation for a sequence that takes n-1 and adds n-2 to it. So depending on what you want to do, it's kind of cool. You can bring in this data and run it up to the length count that you want, but you can also bring in double data. I think I put this here for a reason. There we go, the list length I'm bringing up. I think that's maybe not what I wanted to do. Maybe it was the list length and then the initial. Yeah, basically setting the initial to and then having control over that in the sequence, which is kind of cool. Yeah, you can set the initial to and not have the default. Sorry for forgetting that, but I did this a few little minutes ago. And of course, the default is at 1-1 to start, and you can set that initial one to any number slider you want, to any numbers that you want as the initial numbers going in. So that's what that was about. All right, and then let's keep moving and plugging along. We've got a series coming in now that I start a series, and I go from start step count, which is a very good tool to start getting in the habit of understanding. Start step count, and then I bring it down to a jitter node, which I think is pretty cool because you can jitter it between the jitter value is where, let me think how that works again. The jitter is on as a percentage. The seed is going to change the jitter. There's something going on here, and I might actually have everything. Nope, had it enabled. Sorry, I'm just wrapping my head around what I was doing again. You can see I got ahead on doing a lot of other nodes before I should do these, and then I should go right into them. So let's grab the number, the jitter node. Yeah, strength from 0 to 1 on complete. Yes, okay, on complete shuffling. So if I wanted to really shuffle those things around, I would do this, and you can see that data changing. Okay, so you see the effects of that. If I'm not jittering at all, it leaves it as the same. If I want a real 100% jitter effect, I'll bring it all the way along the line. And seeds, of course, are the same thing. You can, it's kind of like a random cutting out of a Tinkercad and exporting it, but you have control because if you like what was set at 396, you can record that and then always go back to that seed and have the same pattern. So you don't get lost if you actually seed it. Yeah, that's the reason. And there's the indices of how they're being seeded. So it's listing the indices of where they've been seeded, and it's also giving you the values here. Okay, stacking data is kind of cool. Let's bring it back down to 4 so I can see what I was stacking. There we go. I'm stacking the data that's coming in as that series, again, 0, 1, 2, 3. And as I do that, 0, it's going to put 0 in once, 1 in twice, 2 in 3 times, 3 in 4 times. And the stacks are written out in that order. You can change that stack and make it stack any way you want. So that's an interesting thing to start getting control of. If you're thinking geometry or floors of a building or architecturally or sculpturally or whatever you're thinking in modular units. The last pattern I have is a random, which is pretty cool. And what I did here is I have the same seed that I can throw the random in any way I want. The number I can have within that sets of random is pretty cool because I can bump it up to 3. I can take it back down to 1. I haven't grafted or done anything. This actually comes out as a grafted tool of lists with items on it. So basically everything's on its separate list with 2, 3, 4, 5 items on each one. And I have steps of 5 to play off the original range. So I'm actually playing with the 0 through 10, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then yeah, that's basically it. You can play with getting a lot of data off of the random. So that was a little confusing in there. Like I said, I'll try not to get ahead of myself next time, but enjoy yourself. Sets number 2. It's going to get real tricky as we jump into sets. These sets, I am actually going over to character sets to try and understand what's happening in these. And then what I'm going to do is on the text one, I'm going to have to stay with, I think I go back to numbers on it. Nope, I stay with letters, obviously, on the text, and I work that through, and I get into a little bit of trouble here on this item for formatting and figuring out cultures. We'll get into that, and then as I plug through, we'll get into our final set of tree data, and what I've realized at that point, in order to really get into the details of working with data trees, I've got to go back in the mode labs, which is what I started with, saying that is incredibly important to know that that primer of mode labs and the tutorials of the intermediate and advanced data trees. Otherwise, you're not going to make a lot of sense when it gets down into flowing into the relative items and the relative item, and then with the path mapper, it's going to get really difficult. So at this point, I've brought it all the way as far as I'm comfortable doing with sets, and we'll do that in the next 2 videos. And vectors, it's going to simplify a little bit for us after we get past the fields And then it gets pretty, not simple, but we start dealing with some cool algorithms and pull out some simple geometries through curved surfaces and meshes, and getting into all the intersection tools, the transformation tools, and display tools. Then we'll get into plugins. But I really feel, as far as I've gone with sets, I'll make it to here, and then I'm going to have to slow down and go back into some tutorials on Mode Labs specifically. Otherwise, I can't be half as good as these guys that have done such an incredible job. Thanks so much for watching.